Welcome, welcome, Ananda. I should have you know that Ananda, besides the awards that were mentioned earlier, Ananda has won a litany of other awards, and she has an honorary PhD from the University of Silesia in Poland. She's the Grand Officer of the Order of the Star and Key of the Indian Ocean, which is the second highest national decoration from Mauritius. She's also received the Officier des Arts, the lettres from the government of France, and a whole load of awards that I do not have the time to list. You've written 25 books, Ananda. You started your career at the age of 15 when you won a short story competition and published your first book, a collection of short stories, at the age of 19. That is a long, distinguished career. Let's start from the beginning. How did it all start?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. It all started with passion for books, I guess. And at the time when I was a child in a small village of Mauritius, my father had sugarcane plantations. And the only leisure we had before television, before computers and internets and telephones was reading. So in the 1960s in Mauritius, my father would go to the town and buy boxes of second-hand books that he would just pick in piles, and bring home. And for us, for my sisters and I, it was the most extraordinary treasure we could find, because we would sort of delve into that box and find gold nuggets of literature from all the world. It was French literature, it was English literature, it was, all sorts of books, thrillers. And also my mother loved to, tell us tales from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. So we had this oral tradition of Hindu mythology, plus the books that we were reading in English and French. And I think it's the love of reading gave me the love of writing from a very, very young age. So, maybe I knew that I wanted to be a writer when I was about 12 or 13. And that's why I have a long career, because I never stopped. And it's been, the most fulfilling 50 plus years of my life writing.
That's incredible. I have been immersed in Ananda's books for the last week or so, and there is a spareness to her prose that is so exquisite, it's like reading poetry. I've been very curious, Ananda, if your writing was always as spare as it is in the 2 or 3 books that I've read. How have you evolved as a writer over the years?
No, it wasn't as spare as that. I think when I started writing novels as a young adult, I have an absolute love for language. And the French language is a very lyrical language. I think maybe that's what sort of resonated in me and made me want to write in that language. So I was sort of using it to the maximum and writing very long sentences, very sort of sometimes too convoluted, but very poetic. But then slowly, as you mature, it's a learning process. With every book you're learning something, you're revisiting yourself and thinking, if I had to write this now, several years later, I would have written it maybe a bit differently. And although I don't reject any of my books, of course, but I can see where I could have changed. And I think with time, you realize that you can say more with fewer words, but then each word has to count, each sentence has to count. So that's why, especially in that book, Eve Out of Her Ruins, there are no long descriptions of the place, but everything is like a sort of has to touch a very, very important and sensitive aspect, so that when I'm reading it myself, I don't think, oh, why did I put that sentence here? It has no place, you know. So this is the book which is closer to poetic writing of all my books.
I would love for you to give the audience here a taste of what your writing is all about. Do you mind reading a short extract?
No, of course not, because that's the real voice after all, you know. So just a little extract out of Eve, out of her runes, which is about a 17-year-old girl growing up in a very, very poor area of Port Louis, which is the capital of Mauritius, and who's exposed to violence from childhood onwards. He's a poor excuse for a father. He doesn't even know where to start with me. He ponders, he thinks, he wanders. Images float around and crash against his memories. A messed up bed, a messed up body, and too much woman for such a little girl. A kid's love is passive. Then the clock starts ticking. The kid goes wild. What's a father supposed to do to bring his daughter to her senses, to keep her body from going crazy, to assert his power again? What power does he have over me besides his violence? Mother is drowning, kneading her flesh in despair, all the while wishing she had an easier way to kill herself. She's just a small pile of shame at this point. Because of me, she doesn't dare make herself seen anywhere. She knows me. She knows how far my defiance will go, how far I myself will go. Not just to destroy myself, but to drag them along with me. A poor mother saddled with a girl so stubborn in her fury. Isn't that what every mother dreads? Distrust burrows within her as well. The mother who couldn't take the reins and tame this wild blood, this surfeit of pride, this headstrong willfulness. Children have wings of lead and keep thinking they can fly until they're found, trash in a pile of trash. The windows are filled with holes, the buildings go dark, the water doesn't run anymore. All friendly light is gone. The neighborhood is drowned in darkness. Nobody goes out. A girl left dead and unavenged. A girl still rummaging through the ruins. Blood is called for. Only screams manage to tear through the emptiness.
Thank you for that, Ananda. I have spoken to you quite a bit, and I've exchanged many emails with you. Your emails to me in English read like poetry. Is there a reason that you've chosen to write only in French? Don't you think that could you talk a bit about that?
Yes, again, it's a bit of a mystery, and I think that, well, in Mauritius, we are exposed to a lot of languages, and as soon as we go to primary school, sometimes even earlier, we learn both English and French. In the country itself, we speak Mauritian Creole, but we also have the other languages which are like sort of music in our ears. And so we hear Hindi, we hear Bhojpuri in the villages. My ancestors came from South India, so my mother used to speak Telugu, although I don't speak it. But all these languages sort of come together in your mind as a child. And I think somehow maybe the books I read in French were the ones I loved most, and that this language resonated more with me because of its musicality, because of its poetry. And I also remember at 17 years old reading the poetry of Rimbaud, the poet Rimbaud, who started writing at 17, and this poetry was so like a sort of, sort of an explosion of beauty and violence because of his rebellion against society, against everything. So for me, it came together maybe that way, that these poets I admired so much, these writers I admired so much, I wanted to sort of follow, if you like, in their footsteps. So I started writing in French mainly and participated in short story competitions. And I won a prize at 15, which was organized in France by French television. And so the short story was published, was read on radio, and after that I didn't stop basically. So French became the more of the intuitive and emotional language. But then I went to do all my studies in London, and English became the academic language, I would say. So I wrote a PhD thesis in English, but whenever I wanted to write literature, fiction, I came back to France, and the two languages sort of remain in equilibrium, let's say, with me.
This is a ridiculously short session. I have just been signaled that we have only 5 minutes. 5 more minutes. Oh, okay.
Really?
All right. There are a few budding novelists
really short.
yeah, I know. It's horrible. There are a few budding novelists in the audience who I'm sure are very curious what A, your writing process is like, and B, if you have any writing rituals. How do you discipline yourself? Yeah.
You know, because I've been writing since a very early age, it's become part of my sort of daily life, let's say. But also as a woman, as you know, your time is never really your own. I very often tease my sort of male writer friends by saying, oh yes, you, even if you have small children, when you say, okay, I'm going to write now, don't disturb me, they won't come and disturb you. You can close the door. For a mother, you can never close that door. If my children are sort of coming and saying, we need you, I'm not just going to say, no, I'm writing, you know. So the sort of almost training we get as women is to use all the time we can get just to do that writing. So in a way, that's the way I've been used to. So every minute I have counts, and even more now. So with age, I think, I don't know how many years I've left. I mean, not to be pessimistic, but you never know. So I think every moment counts. And also the way one of the aspects that's been a constant is that I've always had several texts, sort of almost parallel. I write several texts at the same time, because if I'm stuck on one, then I don't have to sort of agonize about that text. I move to the other, leave that one, forget it a little bit, and then go back after a while and say, oh, now I know how I'm going to change it or to move along with it. So which means that I don't have to stop at any moment just waiting for inspiration. I can move from one to the other. And sometimes it's different genres. It can be poetry, it can be short stories, or it can be 2 novels that will fight in a way for which one wants to come out first, you know.
Okay, all right. We will now open the floor to questions. We have time for maybe 2 questions, so could a volunteer?
There was a gentleman over there.
Hi, so I have a 2-part question. First of all, it's not pretty straightforward, but which one would you consider your mother tongue? Rather first language, English or French? And how does your thought process in writing in that one differ from your second language?
Well, I'm often asked the question about mother tongue, and I usually say, if you have about an hour, I can talk about it, because it's a very, very deep question. As I say, if I have to really literally say what my mother's tongue is, it's Telugu. But she spoke to me in Telugu and to my sisters when we were really, I mean, from birth onwards. But as soon as you go out in the society, even at 3 years old, 4 years old, you go to a nursery school, and in the society around us, nobody spoke Telugu because it's a very small minority in Mauritius. Even in the extended family, everybody spoke Creole. At school, we learned English and French. So as children, you don't realize the importance, and I lost it very quickly because I was speaking Creole with my cousins, French at school, learning English. I said, I don't want to speak Telugu, and sort of, it's like a sort of rejection, you know. And only as an adult did I realize how much that rejection was hard for my mother, you know. She really felt, because that language is very important for her, and I mean, she passed away many years ago, but it's like a kind of pain that will never be resolved. So, but at the same time, I would say that French as a writing language came and sort of filled that hole, so that, and sorry, I'm going to be a bit long, but just an anecdote. A few years ago, a French newspaper asked me that same question, and I wrote the article about it, and I said, I wrote, I don't remember a word of Telugu. And then suddenly I said, it came that I remembered one sentence in Telugu, a very short sentence, where she told me, Ananda kalamutiskra, which means, Ananda, go and fetch the pen. And it came back to me while I was writing that article that the only sentence I remember from her is telling me to fetch the pen, which I have done all my life. And I said, okay, well, I didn't betray her that much because I did write, and a lot of her is in my writing, very present in a lot of my writing. So that's the way I've sort of consoled myself from a loss which I will always regret all my life.
Yes, sir.
What is the main idea behind choosing the word confluences for your book?
Between the word?
Confluences for your book, yeah.
That wasn't me, but confluence. I guess I am a confluence of different cultures, different languages. As a Mauritian of Indian ancestry, I've grown up with a sort of Hindu culture, in Indian culture, music, etc. But I have a completely Western education. So, well, our sort of was mainly in English and French, literature, music, plus the Creole culture, which is a sort of mixture of everything in Mauritius, because it's a very multicultural society. So we grow up with Chinese friends, Muslim friends, or what they call African descent. So my mindset is sort of completely an amalgamation of and a confluence of all these influences, which I feel is an amazing richness. For me, this identity, which is made up of so many different world cultures and influences, has sort of suffused into my writing. And, but what I fight against is the sort of rigidification of identities that makes us think we're different from, these are not us, these people are different from us, and we create barriers which are very artificial when the world is all about richness of the other. You know?
And to read her books is to know a lot more about the world that you just spoke about. It is a very short session. I apologize for that, but Ananda will be signing copies of the books, which are available at the bookstore. There's an author signing tent there, and I'm sure you could talk to her a little there.
Yeah, and I'll participate in the poetry reading this afternoon at 5:30, I think. But this is probably the shortest.
I am extremely apologetic.
I know it's not your fault, but sorry to all of you. But I would have loved to speak to all of you, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, but there's an author signing happening there. Buy copies of a book. You will be happy you did. All right? Thank you very much. You've been
Thank
a great
you.
audience. Thank you, Ananda. Yeah.